You're listening to The Horseshoe Guys with Josh Carney and Jake Arthur. Your quest to find the most in-depth Indianapolis Colts podcast has triumphantly reached its terminus. Be sure to join Colts Nation's deep divers at horseshoehuddle.com, part of the Sports Illustrated Digital Network.
And welcome into the Horseshoe Huddle on Sports Illustrated podcast. I am your deputy editor, Josh Carney, joined tonight by a new face on the Horseshoe Huddle, the Horseshoe Guys podcast, our content intern at Sports Illustrated, Andrew Moore. Andrew, welcome to the show. Pleased to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a fun time so far, and just looking to keep it rolling. Excited to get the season started here, training camp at least in a couple weeks. But appreciate you having me on. Yeah,
tell the listeners and the viewers just a little bit about yourself. Where you're from, how you became a Colts fan, and what kind of sent you on this path of media and covering the Colts.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Still live here. I actually really wasn't too big into football until my third grade year, when my teacher was a huge Colts fan, and he kind of got me into it. And then from there, I've just kind of been hooked. So, and then going up through high school, started really studying the team, and through college, and really just becoming more of a diehard fan as the years went on. So now, and I was starting up my own Colts podcast, The Educated Fan, with my co-host Brandon Moses. That kind of got my start into sports media, and it kind of just fueled that passion for covering the Colts. And I've always liked writing, been a good writer as far as just trying to explain things in detail and really expressing myself through that way. So having the opportunity to write about my favorite football team for Sports Illustrated, it's pretty awesome. So I've enjoyed it this month that I've been on the team so far, and I hope the readers are enjoying the content, and I'm just excited for the season to get started.
Yeah, they certainly are. I mean, like I said off air, you're doing a great job. We're thrilled to have you here. This is going to be an off-the-wall question for you. Who is your all-time favorite Colt non-Hall of Famer? So the Hall of Famers are out of it because those are easy ones. Who's your off-the-wall all-time favorite Colt?
Off the wall. So I'd say it probably comes down to two. I'd either say Dallas Clark. Just loved Dallas Clark's game. I'm going to include like Dwight Freeney, Robert Mathis in the Hall of Fame for the Colts, but Dallas Clark. And then when we're talking about kind of this next generation of Colts team, it's got to be T.Y. Hilton. Just his story of really coming from an unknown, and then just that combination and that chemistry he had with Andrew Luck, really just carrying these Colts teams over the 2010 decade. T.Y. Hilton's got a soft spot in my heart for sure.
Yeah, mine, just to throw mine in there, mine's Gary Brackett. I mean, I love that guy. He came out of nowhere and was just absolutely fantastic in the middle of some of those really good defenses. He doesn't get enough love from Colts fans, especially now that we're so far removed from his playing days. But he was fantastic in the middle. He was a great leader. The easy answer for me would be Dwight Freeney. I mean, I went to Syracuse. That guy is the best pass rusher I've ever seen. That's the easy one, but he should be in the Hall of Fame, and I'm assuming he will be soon, along with Robert Mathis. So speaking of defensive line, I know we were going to start offensive line, but I'm going to change it up, try a segue here. You've been putting together some training camp preview pieces on certain positions, and your most recent one, you profiled the defensive ends, a position that's undergone a lot of changes this offseason. Obviously, Justin Houston is still on the market, but he is not coming back to Indianapolis. Danico Autry to, unfortunately, the Tennessee Titans, so the Colts will have to deal with him twice a year. Just a lot of changes. This is not your Robert Mathis, Dwight Freeney days along the defensive line at defensive end for the Colts. But they certainly hope it could be with their first-round selection, Kwity Paye. They come right back on day 2 in the 2021 draft, grab Vanderbilt's Dayo Odeyingbo, who will probably miss first half of the year with a torn Achilles, but talent is through the roof. They added Isaac Rochelle in free agency. They brought back Al-Quadin Muhammad. Where are you at with this defensive line group, and what was kind of your takeaway from the preview overall?
So with this defensive end group, I think if you're a Colts fan, I mean, you're very excited about Kwity Paye coming on board, but I also think we need to have like tempered expectations for Kwity Paye, because it's very unlikely for a defensive end to come out of the gate unless you're like a Dwight Freeney, and even him, it took about midway through his first season before he started getting on a roll. So with these guys, they're just such a young group, because not even Kwity Paye, but Taekwon Lewis, who's probably, as of right now, I would put him as the favorite to start at left end opposite of Kwity Paye. He's never started before. Kemoko Turay is coming off of an ankle injury still, that he had surgery again in February. So with those guys, then you talk about Dayo Odangbo, who we probably won't see till November, and even then the Colts are going to bring him on slowly. So this defensive end group is very, very young. They have a lot of talent, and I'm excited for these young guys to really get opportunities now, because while Justin Houston and Danico Autry were very solid players for us, each I think finished second and third respectively for the team in sacks last year. I think it's just time for these young guys to see what they're made of. I mean, Taekwon Lewis and Kemoko Turay, both in contract years. When you invest that kind of draft capital in guys like Kwity Paye and Dayo Odangbo, you want to get them on the field early and often to show what they have. So while I think this group has a lot of potential, especially Kwity Paye and Dayo Odangbo, I think this year, at least in 2021, we might need to be careful of overhyping these guys and expecting them to be double-digit sack guys right out of the gate.
You mentioned overhyping, but I think that from a national perspective, it's overlooked in a sense. I mean, obviously we don't know what Kwity Paye is going to be in the NFL. We won't know until November or December what Dayo Odangbo is. But just on paper, with how much they've invested in this position, if you just look at the top four, which I'm assuming that's Paye, that's Taekwon Lewis, that's Kemoko Turay, and that's Odangbo, that's pretty darn good on paper. Now, granted, Odangbo is going to move around a bit. He can play inside as a 3-tech. He's got the length and the strength to do that. But just those four on paper, Andrew, I mean, that looks pretty darn good compared to maybe last year, in my opinion. Where are you at there? Do you think this group is a bit overlooked nationally? I mean, I know you mentioned you don't want to overhype them, as a fan coming into the year, because you don't want to put unrealistic expectations. But do you think it's a little overlooked, at least on paper?
I really do. And I think we're going to see that towards the end of the year, especially because, I mean, Chris Ballard has said this over and over, and I think he's absolutely correct in that it takes defensive ends and rookie pass rushers some time to get adjusted to the pro game, because you're not going up against a guy that may play tackle or guard in the league. You're going up against left tackles and right tackles that are getting paid $20 million a year. So it takes some time. But I think towards the end of the year, when you start seeing a Kwity Paye get more comfortable in this defense, instead of doing kind of the read and react that he did at Michigan, just being able to pin his ears back and go get the quarterback. When you see Taekwon Lewis getting more opportunities, because, I mean, last year at the beginning of the year in training camp, we were talking about Taekwon Lewis not even making the roster. And he sure showed out, and he came on strong. And I would love to see him get more opportunities at that left defensive end, because I think he can be a solid player. So I think you're right in saying that it is overlooked, because I just think, as of right now at least, we haven't really seen too much of these guys, and they haven't been able to display their full talent. So giving them more opportunities to play, letting these young guys get adjusted into the Colts scheme and adjusted to the pro game, I think we're going to start reaping the benefits of that towards the end of the year, and really see guys like Kwity Paye and Taekwon Lewis and even Kemoko Turay coming back from and being fully healed from that ankle injury. We're going to reap those rewards even more as the season goes along.
I think another part, too, that really helps these two rookies, like, I hate to continue to harp on this, but Odangbo is probably an afterthought until November at this point. But what's going to help Kwity Paye and then eventually Odangbo, they're not coming from, I hate to say this, but like Sam Houston State or something like that. They're not going against, future insurance salesmen or grocery baggers or anything like that. They played in Power 5 conferences, two of the biggest, in the Big Ten with Kwity Paye and the SEC with Dayo Odangbo. These guys went up against NFL talent week after week in school. there is a slight transition to the NFL for that. 100%. You're going against all pros and Pro Bowlers every week rather than fringe NFL guys some weeks. But I really do agree with you that I think we're not going to see their full potential until after the bye week, when they really get a chance to catch their breath, go back, watch some film, and see where they can improve. But I don't know about you, but I think that the sky's the limit for those two. And I hate to say this, but it's just a thought that I can't get out of my mind. If they're healthy and they reach their potential, and I'm speaking of Pae and Odeyingbo, I think we honestly could be looking at another Freeney-Mathis combination. I mean, those are outlandish expectations. And if anyone wants to be mad at me in the comments, I totally get it. Those are two Ring of Honors, future Pro Football Hall of Famers. But you just look at the athleticism and the strength and power and speed. I mean, I don't know how you can't be excited about those two.
And I think those what the Colts are expecting as well. When you put that high of draft capital in these guys, the Colts saw Kwity Paye as a top 10 pick. If you were watching their series with the next pick, defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus said that Kwity Paye was their number one pass rusher. And when you hear about guys talking about just, especially Chris Ballard, what Odeyingbo is going to bring to this team. He was talking about, even with the severity of his Achilles injury, if the Colts are going to spend a second-round pick on Dayo Odeyingbo, with how much emphasis they put on the medicals for these draft prospects, he's confident. I mean, every time the Colts have picked a player that has had a major injury under Ballard in the draft, they've turned out to be great. I mean, Darius Leonard was injured and got injured on it in the combine, and then again on his pro day. Colts still picked him. Look how that turned out. Julian Blackmon with the torn ACL. So I think Chris Ballard has built up enough leeway here till we can trust him. When he takes a guy that's injured. Usually it pans out pretty well for us. So, and I think just the way that Jim Irsay talked about it, I mean, we have to kind of be careful what Jim Irsay says, because there's no bigger fan of the Colts than Jim Irsay. Right. But the Colts have such high expectations with Kwity Paye and Dayo Odeyingbo, and that's what they want. They want that fierce pass rush that they had in the 2000s with Freeney and Mathis, and they want that with Paye and Odeyingbo. And as they can reach their full potential, I don't see why that couldn't be a possibility.
Now, I know we've spent, about 12 minutes here talking about the two rookies over and over again. I want to talk about depth. I hate to say that Kemoko Turay is depth at this point, but that's really what he is. I mean, he's had 2 significant ankle surgeries. We haven't fully seen what he is, but, if he's your starter opposite Paye, I mean, it's okay. Same with Taekwon Lewis, who we expect to be better, but you look at depth. They brought in Isaac Rochelle on a 1-year deal. He played 4 years with the Los Angeles Chargers. I almost said San Diego Chargers. That would have been horrible. You look at Isaac Rochelle. They brought back Al-Quadin Muhammad. The one name we haven't touched on, Ben Banogu. This is make or break for him. And I'll be honest, I did not like him coming out in that class. I was not a fan of his play coming out of TCU. I obviously saw the athleticism on tape, but he got a lot of easy sacks in college, and it didn't look like he was really putting together a pass rush. And I've had conversations with Zach off air about Banogu going back to the day he was picked. This is a huge year for him, and if he doesn't figure it out, if he doesn't show something in training camp, I do wonder if Chris Ballard tries to flip him before cutting him. Are you kind of on the same page with Banogu, and where are you at? What do you want to see from him this year aside from doing something? I know that's broad, but doing something productive on the field.
Ben Banogu is pretty much in the same situation that Taekwon Lewis was last year before training camp. It's either time to show you were worth that second-round pick, show you have potential, or you're not going to be with this team. I mean, Chris Ballard has shown that it doesn't matter where you're drafted. That doesn't guarantee you a spot. I mean, he cut Zach Banner his first year of training camp because he wasn't panning out with the Colts. Terrell Basham, Quincy Wilson. There's a bunch of guys that were higher draft picks for Ballard, and if you're not panning out, you're not going to be on this team. Ben Banogu's got a tough road to climb here because of the Colts picking Kwity Paye and wanting to give him as much opportunity as possible. Taekwon Lewis, who came on, Kemoko Turay, if he is back, he can be used in various sub packages even, and he's a very good pass rusher. Ben Banogu, it's almost like the cliche that when we talked about when he was drafted, the Colts first talked about putting him at the Sam linebacker position. Mm-hmm. Then they ended up moving him to just pass rush. They weren't really sure what position he was going to play. Well, there's a saying that if you don't have a true position, or if you play two positions, you don't really have a true position. Yeah. So it's just time for Ben Banogu. I mean, whether you're a second-round pick or not, when you're a healthy scratch for 7 out of the 16 games last year, that's a problem. There are reports he's not getting it done on the practice field, and that's when you're playing for this Colts team. That's where it starts. Matt Eberflus wants to see you getting it done in practice, wants you to practice hard, and if you don't do that and you don't show it on the practice days, you're not going to be active for game days. So it's got to click with Ben Banogu. Otherwise, especially with how crowded this defensive end group is, it's just a very, very packed group as far as talent. And there's a lot of young, hungry guys that want to play. And if he doesn't realize that, he very well could be flipped at the end of training camp, or at worst, he gets cut and he's without a team once we get to that point.
You touched on a great point with Banogu that I think just gets overlooked when it comes to the discussion about him. He doesn't get it done on the practice field. He's so inconsistent there, and that's the biggest concern for me, Andrew. It's like, I would get it if you were struggling, on the field strictly in games, struggling to produce, struggling with assignments in games. But when you can't put it together in practice and you're not even getting a hat on game day, I'm honestly surprised they didn't give up last year in training camp, because this is getting to a point where it's like, okay, this could be a wasted pick. You've got to make a move here, because I'd hate to see the same thing happen again in training camp where Banogu's just not with it in practice. He's not really producing in training camp. And then it comes to cut down day and you keep him over, let's say hypothetically over an Al-Quadin Muhammad. I don't think that happens, but let's say you keep him over a steady veteran presence just because he has potential. That would be worst case scenario for me. But I want to go back to a point you made before we move on from defensive ends. You mentioned very early on we have to see these young guys. When it comes to Banogu, like I need to see him. I need to see him the first month of the season. Play him as much as possible, and then if it's not working, you move on. There's going to be plenty of veteran defensive ends out on the street or on practice squads that you could poach if it comes to that. But you have to play him. You have to see what you have. Because if not, you wasted a draft asset you picking him. You have to play these young guys. I said with Jake last Monday, I don't want to see Al-Quadin Muhammad on the field on third down. I don't want to see Isaac Rochelle on the field on third down. I want the raw guy that maybe doesn't know what he's doing. Turn him loose. Pin your ears back. Go hunt the quarterback. That's all that matters. And best case scenario, Banogu shows that, hey, he knows how to rush the passer. It's clicking. Worst case, you move on. Those are the breaks of the game. So, any last word on defensive end, or are you ready to move on here to offensive line?
I think I will say this: if we start seeing Banogu play more, that means he's getting it done in practice for what we can't see. But if not, that means he's not getting it done at practice and it just hasn't clicked for him. And when you're talking about the younger guys, once Odangbo is back healthy, when you're talking about like on a third down or a NASCAR sub package, when you have Kwity Paye and Kemoko Turay on the outside, DeForest Buckner and Odangbo on the inside, good luck to opposing quarterbacks. That's very terrifying.
Yeah, but that is not fun.
it's a young defensive end group, but it's got a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see how they progress throughout the year.
While that group may look terrifying, along the defensive line for quarterbacks, what will be terrifying for defensive lines is the Indianapolis Colts' offensive line. Right. You broke it down in two parts. You previewed the tackles the other day, and then you went to interior offensive line. I want to focus quickly on tackles. We've touched on tackle ad nauseum this offseason with the retirement of Anthony Costanzo, the non-drafting of one of the top left tackles in the draft by Chris Ballard. But They added Julian Blackmon, Sam Tevi, and most importantly, veteran Eric Fisher, all in free agency. It seems like that's kind of shored up at this point. Right tackle is not an issue, other than how much will Braden Smith get in his extension? That's the only question with that guy. I love that guy, probably the most underrated Colt on this roster. But let's go back to left tackle. How do you feel about the depth there? Obviously, Eric Fisher's kind of in the same boat as Dayo Odeyingbo, probably going to be out until November. So it's going to probably be the Sam Tevi show, I would guess, at this point at left tackle. Are you concerned with that? Are you more confident than others in Sam Tevi? Where are you at with left tackle at this point?
I think I'm confident enough that Sam Tevi, we can win with Sam Tevi if you're a Colts fan, because he has starting experience at left tackle. He started there all last year for the Chargers, and the past 2 years, or the prior 2 years before that, he was their starter at right tackle. So he's got plenty of starting experience, and I think playing next to Quinton Nelson is going to be a tremendous help. That's going to make his job a lot easier. He hasn't been able to play with a guard of Quinton Nelson's stature. Really nobody has besides Anthony Costanzo. So I think that's going to elevate his game. And we don't need Sam Tevi to be a Pro Bowl left tackle to succeed. The Colts just need Sam Tevi to be honestly better than what LaRaven Clark brought last year, because Sam Tevi, I think he can hold up well enough. And from what we've been hearing as well is that Eric Fisher might be back about mid-October. So if he goes on the PUP list, he could only miss about 6 weeks, then come back and kind of get things going. But I think with Sam Tevi, as far as me personally, I think I'm confident enough that the Colts can win with Sam Tevi at left tackle. And then when Eric Fisher comes back, I think Sam Tevi is a fantastic option as a backup swing tackle. Whether Eric Fisher goes out again or something happens to Braden Smith, you can plug Sam Tevi in there and be fine. It's a far cry from last year when we had to put LaRaven Clark and Chaz Green in the lineup, and you're kind of fearing for Phillip Rivers' life back there. But while saying all that, it's also imperative that Sam Tevi plays well and plays solid enough, because those first 5 games, we're going to talk about it here in a bit, but Seahawks, Rams, Titans, Dolphins, Ravens, all teams that really like to get after the quarterback, and they're going to zero in on Sam Tevi as being the weak link of that line. So he's got to still play well, especially if the Colts want to get off to a 3-2, 4-1 start, that they can catapult them through the rest of the year. But I think I'm not obviously overexcited about Sam Tevi being at left tackle. But I'm confident enough that Sam Tevi can get the job done, that the Colts can win games with him there until Eric Fisher gets back.
Yeah, and our colleague Zach Hicks has broken it down pretty in depth, ways that the Colts can try and hide Tevi a bit at left tackle, give him some help, whether that's a Jack Doyle or a Mo Alley Cox, or scheming Carson Wentz to get on the move away from Tevi, shift that pocket a bit. You see that across the league, especially with teams that have weaker offensive lines in general, not just one position, but overall. Smart offensive coordinators and offensive minds, they tend to shift the pocket. It's harder to rush the passer when the pocket is moving. You don't have that landmark. So I think that's going to help. And look, if Sam Tevi was the starting left tackle last year with Phillip Rivers, I'd be absolutely terrified. No disrespect to Phillip Rivers. I think he's a Hall of Famer. But he is that stand in the pocket, just an absolute tree, that landmark for pass rushers to tee off on. That's not going to be the case with Carson Wentz. And that's going to be a huge help. And like you mentioned, play next to Quinton Nelson. I mean, Tevi's never played with anybody that good. So, important note to mention too, Sam Tevi's played nearly 2,400 snaps in the NFL. That is nothing to overlook. I mean, that counts. And it's not just 2,400 snaps at left tackle. He's played right tackle, like you mentioned. So when Fisher's back, that's excellent, excellent depth. Really quickly at right tackle, though, Braden Smith, going to get an extension soon. But behind him, who do you expect to win that fourth tackle job? Because I'm assuming with Fisher starting the year on the PUP, I'm assuming Julian Blackmon's probably going to make it. But where are you at with that fourth tackle, that backup to Braden Smith?
I'm actually a huge fan of Will Holden. I think Will Holden has probably the upside on Julian Davenport, where he came in last year and he only played that one game against the Steelers. But when he was in there, he played pretty well, considering everything that happened until he hurt his ankle and everything started to fall apart for the Colts after that. But Will Holden, and just hearing some different things coming out of OTAs, it sounded like he was getting some run with the ones here and there at left tackle as well. So I think the Colts have a very high opinion of Will Holden. And just because they signed Julian Davenport doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get the reps over Will Holden, right? Because Will Holden, the Colts kept him for a reason as well. So honestly, I would rather have, just watching the film, I would rather have Will Holden over a Julian Davenport, because I have more confidence in Will Holden to get the job done. Julian Davenport, I mean, he's bounced. He started he was with Miami, he was with the Texans, and when you turn the film on, it's not good. It's not good. Now, if he has a good offseason and can improve, playing next to better offensive linemen that the Colts have, but at the same time, I think Will Holden is a better option than Julian Davenport at this point. Now, if Fisher starts out on the physically unable to perform list, and you need to keep all three of those guys, Tevy, Holden, and Davenport, then I think obviously it changes things. But if you're only going to keep one of Holden or Davenport, my money's on Will Holden at this point.
That's where I was going with Fisher on PUP. You're going to keep Tevy and probably Blackman, and then you're obviously going to keep Holden. Do you think that there is a chance? Well, let me back up. Where do you think Will Fries focuses on specifically? Do you think he's more guard, or is he that swing tackle, can play left and right? Because he played every position on the offensive line at Penn State, started more than 40 career games. That is significant for a guy coming out of college along the offensive line. Where do you think he focuses, and do you see him as a potential tackle in the NFL?
I think he could be. I think the Colts will probably want him to focus more on guard and in the NFL, just because his different measurements. And honestly, Will Fries might be the steal of this draft for the Colts when you're talking about the late round picks, because when you're looking at his film from college, I mean, you could probably put like a third or fourth round grade on him. And the thing about Will Fries, and Zach kind of mentioned this in his story, and as I've been doing research for my article on him for my Rookie File series, Will Fries is a guy that is just absolutely dedicated to getting better each and every practice, each and every day. The kid is obsessed with getting better. So if the Colts want him to play guard, I mean, you can imagine how much he's going to put everything into that and really focus on that guard position. I think in a pinch, he could probably swing out to left tackle or right tackle if you need him to. But I think Will Fries' primary position for the Colts, at least, will be guard.
Yeah. Transitioning into the interior of the offensive line, you can't say enough about that trio of Quinton Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Mark Lewinsky. Probably the best interior offensive line in the NFL. And people forget, Lewinsky was cut by none other than the Seattle Seahawks, who have had an insane amount of offensive line issues, and they just let that guy go. I think that's obviously a testament to the Colts coaching and just Chris Ballard's ability to identify overlooked talent and bring them into a system that fits them. But that trio, untouchable in my opinion. The real question is depth. You just recently profiled the interior offensive line. We touched on Will Fries. I think, this is just me, I think he's a stone cold lock for the 53-man roster simply because of his versatility. But other than that, Chris Reed, Danny Pinter, Joey Hunt, where are you at with depth along the offensive line, interior offensive line for the Colts?
I think it's pretty good. And I really think the Colts put a focus on depth along the offensive line, not only at tackle, but also inside. Chris Ballard saw what happened last year when Costanzo and Braden Smith went out. That can't happen again. So to go out, and Danny Pinter played well last year in the game that he had to start for Ryan Kelly. As far as Danny Pinter never playing center before in his life until last year, learning with the Colts, he played pretty well. And I fully expect Danny Pinter to be the backup center again this year. Will Fries, stud. I think he's going to have a really long career as either a backup guard or possibly even a starting guard in the league. Chris Reed, you talked about it. He was a starter at the Carolina Panthers. The Colts, to get him on a 1-year minimum veteran deal, that's also a steal. If in a pinch, if Quinton Nelson, God forbid, goes down, or Mark Lewinsky, I think Chris Reed could step in there and play very well because of that starting experience. And then you're kind of talking about the odd man out. Is it going to be Joey Hunt, or is Joey Hunt going to be able to beat out a Chris Reed? We'll just have to see. But I think when you're talking about those three, and I think these three will probably be the interior linemen that make the roster in Pinter, Fries, and Reed, you have to feel pretty comfortable about what you have behind those starting three on the interior, and feel pretty confident that if one of those do go down, the next man up mentality really can be a next man up, and they'd come in and serve well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Chris Ballard focused on depth. I think depth is a very, very clear strength along the offensive line for this team. We mentioned Will Fries' versatility. Danny Pinter can play both guards. He can play center. I believe he can even move out to guard or to tackle in a pinch. And then Chris Reed played left guard for the Panthers last year, has center experience in the NFL and right guard experience. I mean, they have three guys there just alone. You could carry 8 offensive linemen if you wanted to and free up another spot or two for depth elsewhere, because those three behind the starting 5 can play anywhere along the offensive line. I mean, that you're hard pressed to find that in today's NFL. And you mentioned what happened last year with guys going down, whether it was COVID on the COVID restricted list or just injuries in general. When that happened, the Colts were pretty much decimated up front and completely changed their offense. And that's not going to happen again this year, knock on wood, because the depth is incredible. Aside from the starting trio, who would you choose as your favorite depth piece for this Colts team? I think I know where you're leaning, and I think I'm in the same boat with you. But out of those, let's say those 4 of Hunt, Fries, Reed, and Pinter, who's your favorite, at least to watch on film?
I think as of probably right now, it's probably Chris Reed, just because of his starting experience and what he's done in this league. But I think my answer will probably change by the end of the year once we have Will Fries in the Colts system and being able to have him focus all of his time at guard. Because you mentioned how he played tackle at Penn State, but then his coaches shifted him inside to guard, not only because it would help the team, but because they saw that he probably would play better as a guard at the next level. So he had that's why he started to play guard, and I think he's just going to continue to get better the more snaps he has, the more reps he has, and as he becomes more comfortable in this Colts scheme. So as of right now, I'd probably say Chris Reed. But when you ask me here in November, December, it's probably going to end up being Will Fries.
Fair enough. Yeah, I thought you were going to say Fries because, I mean, I loved his college tape. I mean, I'll admit, I'm a Penn State fan from Western Pennsylvania. I remember when he committed to Penn State, he committed as a center. And it was like, well, that's a big center, but he's a good athlete. He's played everywhere along that offensive line at Penn State. And his tape is good, as Zach Hicks has pointed out in multiple pieces, just looking at Fries. But I cannot wait to see him in preseason. I really am curious to see what the Colts do with him, whether it's you're at right guard or, hey, on this drive, you're at right guard. This drive, we're going to shift you to left guard or you're going to play tackle. I'm really curious to see how they use that chess piece up front.
Yeah, and Fries is intriguing in that when you're kind of looking ahead to what's coming, I mean, Braden Smith's going to get a huge extension. Quinton Nelson's going to reset the market for interior offensive linemen. If Eric Fisher can return from his Achilles injury, the Colts are probably going to look to try to re-sign him and keep him for the next 4 or 5 years and be their left tackle for the near future. At some point, if you're Chris Ballard, you got to start thinking about how much resources you are dedicating that offensive line. It's going to be very expensive. And with Mark Lewinsky in a contract year this year, that's going to be a question that is going to need to be answered this offseason. Is Mark Lewinsky going to be are the Colts going to be able to afford to bring Mark Lewinsky back? And if not, that's why you're bringing up these young guys like a Will Fries that could possibly come in and be your next starting right guard. Or Chris Reed, if he's here with the team next year. So that's also something that the Colts kind of have to think about, is because you can't have half of your cap space dedicated to your offensive line. I mean, I know Chris Ballard loves to build those lines up, but realistically, you're not going to win a Super Bowl when half your cap space is with guys that don't touch the ball. Yeah. So that's just something to keep an eye on and something to keep in the back of your head next year when Lewinsky's contract is up, whether the Colts are going to put more resources to him or put the resources to Eric Fisher and let Will Fries have his opportunity at right guard at that point in time.
Yeah, if Eric Fisher looks like the Eric Fisher of old, and I think he'll get an extension. Let's say they don't bring Lewinsky back. Just with those four, assuming Nelson resets the market, Smith gets the type of contract he deserves. Ryan Kelly's one of the highest paid centers. And then Fisher, left tackle, if he looks good, he's probably going to get north of $15 million a year. Then you look at the defensive line. DeForest Buckner. I can't remember off the top of my head how much he makes a year, but then you add Grover Stewart's salary next to him. The Colts could have almost $100 million invested in the trenches. And as much as Chris Ballard talks about, games are won and lost in the trenches, and they are, and it's super important. You can't build a team that way in the salary cap era. So a lot of tough questions are coming for the Colts, and I hate to say it because I love watching them on tape, but I think no matter what, this is Lewinsky's last year in Indianapolis because they have young, cheap pieces to kind of fill that void. Heck, they could even draft someone next year at right guard. So some tough questions need to be answered on this team, and I think that's one of them. But yeah, any final thoughts on the offensive line in general at this point here? What, about 2 weeks from training camp?
I mean, I think it's just going to be another great year for this offensive line, especially when we get Eric Fisher back, and if he can get healthy and kind of resume his Pro Bowl form, we're going to see another dominant year from this offensive line. And not only is that going to help the running back group, it's going to help build Carson Wentz's confidence back as he tries to resurrect his career in Indianapolis as well.
Do you think, just really quickly, do you think Fisher is the most important piece on that offensive line for the Colts? Obviously, Nelson is the straw that stirs the drink. We know how great Kelly is and Smith is, but do you think he's the most important to success in 2021 for this Colts team?
I think probably, just because when you're talking about it with Eric Fisher in the lineup, this offensive line goes to probably top 1 or 2 in the league. If you have Sam Tevi in the lineup, it probably goes back to about maybe 10th or so. Still a great offensive line, but there's going to be those top pass rushers in the league that Sam Tevi will get beat on, and Eric Fisher can hold his own against those.
Yeah. Exciting year ahead in the trenches. I know that's not a glorified area for most fans, but us nerds, in a sense, we love that area of the game, especially here in Indianapolis. So I want to transition back to rookies here. Andrew, you've done an awesome job doing these rookie profiles. Just kind of going through the backstory of the young players the Colts have drafted, and next up on the list is Florida safety Shawn Davis. That's not to be confused with the other Shawn Davis currently on the roster. Thank you, Chris Ballard, for making everyone's life very tough in the media. But Shawn Davis out of Florida, just tell us what you know about him, what you found in your research about his backstory, and where are you at now 3 months removed from the draft with that pick?
Yeah, so Shawn Davis, he was actually probably the guy that I knew the least amount of information about when the Colts drafted him. So Shawn Davis gets picked in the 5th round by the Colts, and a lot of these guys that are NFL players, from the time they start football through their high school years, through college, they're usually the best player on their teams. They're seen by everybody as being untouchable. Well, that's kind of how Shawn Davis started. I mean, even in Pop Warner football, playing for the Palmetto Bay Broncos down there in Miami, he was one of the best players on that team. When he started high school at Southridge down in Miami, he started out on the JV team, but he made too many plays his freshman year that the coaches had to move him up to varsity. And then he made 4 interceptions in 4 games as a freshman on varsity. And then from there, he was all-state. He won state championships. And then as soon as he gets to Florida, it's kind of just a different game, because you're now everybody is on that level. And it can be tough sometimes for guys to kind of adjust to that level, and they can lose confidence. And that's kind of what happened to Shawn Davis. Is when he got to Florida, that first game against Michigan, he gives up a huge touchdown. He plays sparingly the rest of the year, mostly just relegated to special teams work. And that really hit him deep. And not only his coaches got fired from Florida after that abysmal season, and he kind of went into a dark place, but it was the help of his parents, the help of his safety coach, Ron English. Ron English, we'll start with him. He's a guy that tells it like it is. And he wants the best for his players. And Shawn Davis really respected that, I should say. So English was telling him that he's got what it takes. He just needs to go out there and show it. His parents texting him before every game to have a great game and then showing encouragement afterwards. He had that support system around him and then that belief within himself to really pick himself back up and say, you know what, I can do this. And then he goes and he puts together a decent sophomore year, enters the starting lineup as a junior, and then shows off that playmaking ability that he was known for his entire life before going to Florida. He led the team in interceptions the final 2 years, and that was only playing 19 games. He had 5 picks. So the kid's got a nose for the ball. He was the quarterback of the secondary, and that's kind of continued in just the short amount of time he was with the Colts. Chris Ballard has said that Shawn Davis is on the same level that Khari Willis was when Khari Willis was drafted in terms of football IQ. So the Colts are getting a really smart safety, a guy that's a playmaker, and the Colts love guys that make plays on the ball. And I think he's, at least for now, he's going to be a good backup safety that can be put in different situations. He's definitely going to have an impact on special teams. Just like any rookie, there are areas that he can clean up, especially in tackling. He struggles a little bit against size and speed when you turn on the film. But overall, for a 5th-round pick, I think Shawn Davis is going to be a good backup safety for this team, and he's the right kind of guy that fits in this Colts locker room. So just doing all that research on him and kind of finding out that story of how he lost so much confidence, then that support system around him to really bring it back. It's a really nice story, and I'm happy that Shawn Davis can continue his career with the Colts and show what he's got. Honestly, it's going to be fun to watch him.
Yeah, it's tough to go for being – the man to, you're just another fish in the pond at that point. Everybody's as good as you, if not better. And look, Florida had a loaded secondary every year that Shawn Davis was down there. Obviously they are a Power 5 program. They are one of the premier programs in terms of name recognition in college football. So they're always going to get the great recruits. But important to note, too, for those watching and listening, Ron English is now the co-defensive coordinator at Purdue. So nice little backstory there. You kind of got some insight into what he means to players. So that's going to be huge for Purdue as well. But the one thing I have a real concern with Davis is his tackling. It's a problem. And as the last line of defense, you have to be a sound tackler. And unfortunately for the Colts, both Shawn Davises are very poor in the tackling department. Obviously, the rookie Shawn Davis has great ball skills, very good football IQ, good range, but I am concerned about the tackling, and I think that if he struggles with that in preseason, that could send him to the practice squad. But, yeah, the ball skills and just the overall splash plays and the big hits are so tantalizing. I mean, he's a talent for sure. But, yeah, you got to be able to tackle in this league, and that's a concern for me. So do you think he's a lock for the roster, or what would you put the percentage at he makes the roster versus he's cut?
I think the Colts will end up keeping probably 4 safeties, and I think it's probably going to come down to the different Shawn Davises, whether it's the Shawn Davis from Pittsburgh or the Shawn Davis from the Florida Gators, because you got obviously Julian Blackmon and Khari Willis as your starters. George Odom, who re-signed on a restricted free agent deal, was a first-team All-Pro as a special teamer. He's going to make the roster, and then it will come down to which Davis performs better. Are you going to go with the veteran Davis from Pittsburgh, who's shown what he's capable of, or are you going to bet on the rookie who has those ball skills but isn't at the best at tackling? And I think it is important to note that just how tackling is such a focus for Matt Eberflus and for this defensive staff. You hardly saw, I mean, going back to the Chuck Pagano days for this Colts team, it seemed like the Colts would lead the league in missed tackles every year. You don't see that now with Matt Eberflus. This team is great on the loaf system. If you're not hustling, if you're missing tackles, you're going to get called out for it. And it could be a rude awakening for these rookies. So if Shawn Davis shows that he is a willing tackler and it shows improvement throughout the preseason and throughout training camp, I think he has a good chance to make the roster.
I think what's really going to help him in his transition to the NFL is something you highlighted very early on in your piece. And again, just fantastic piece, Andrew. Like I learned so much about Shawn Davis just from reading your story. Him going through those trials and tribulations early in his career at Florida. If this was a guy who was, the Pop Warner star, went to high school, was the man in Miami, and then went to Florida and was just, big man on campus, he wouldn't know what it's like to go through a transition and a major struggle. Like he probably will transitioning to the NFL with the Colts, but he's already been through that. He's got a great family to lean on. He has those words from Ron English still probably in the back of his mind, and he's going to a great staff with the Colts. That's very pro player and just player empowerment, not the NBA type of player empowerment, but just positivity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to help him in his transition. I don't think he's going to have any issue with, some tough days in training camp, letting them, pile up and snowball like most rookies tend to do, because he's been through it. He's seen it. So this is just at a different level. I do think he makes the roster in the end. I do think he's also going to make some splash plays in training camp and in preseason that make people turn their heads. And I'm not saying he's going to be your next starting safety on this team. I think overall in the NFL, he's a depth player, probably a dime or nickel package type of safety. But I think he's going to be good depth once he develops. So what was your biggest takeaway from Davis, just quickly, in his backstory, that you were just like, oh, that's really cool? Was it the Ron English situation?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was just the kind of the support system around him. Not only Ron English, but his parents sticking behind him 100%, constantly telling him to have a good game, showing that encouragement. And I think you can also notice a theme with all of these rookies. Going through all of these rookies, their stories, they're all always having to overcome some sort of obstacle. I mean, Kwity Paye's story, if you haven't heard it yet, you're missing out from where his piece. from when his mom had to was an immigrant from Liberia and Guinea, and just the way he came up. Dio Odangbo now with the Achilles injury. Kylan Granson, who went to started at Rice as a wide receiver, left the program, then goes to SMU. All these guys so far that I've done just deep dives into their backstory, they've all had to overcome obstacles and adversity in their careers, and it makes them a stronger person. And I think that's what kind of shows what the Colts are looking for, guys with high character, strong individuals that can handle that, because it's something Chris Ballard says all the time. Their talent determines their ceiling, but their character determines their floor. So these guys are going to work hard, they're going to fight through the adversity, and they're going to push as hard as they can to reach their ceiling. And I'm excited to do, because I've got Sam Ehlinger, Mike Strawn, and Will Fry still to go. I'm excited to do all three of those as well. They're going to be fun pieces.
3 good ones coming up. Yeah, and again, there is a key component with these draft picks under Ballard. They're all building a great culture.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a rough transition. I don't have a good one here, but we're going to preview the first 3 opponents for the Colts quickly here. We've got about 13 minutes left here, Andrew. This is not a prediction. We're not saying how the game's going to go. We're just taking a 30,000-foot view, looking at the first 3 opponents for the Colts. Week 1 at Lucas Oil Stadium. I believe that's a 1 o'clock kickoff. Let me pull it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 1 o'clock on Fox on September 12th against the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson. DK Metcalf riding into town. Obviously, Seattle, ton of turmoil this offseason. Is Russell Wilson going to get traded? Did he or did he not request a trade? He's denying he ever requested a trade. They upgraded the offensive line slightly, brought back Chris Carson. This is still a good defense, not a great one. It's not the Legion Boom anymore, but it's still a good team overall. And I do expect this to be a playoff team, honestly, just on paper. I A tough week one, though. I mean, very tough. Fortunately for the Colts, it's at home in front of 63,000 fans. They're going to have that on their side. Just tell me what your thoughts are on Seattle, and what's the one key thing you're focusing on with the Seahawks, at least right now?
So Seattle, I think, is going to be a good team. Again, we actually just did our NFC West breakdown on the Educated Fan, and I had the Rams winning the division, I have Seattle getting a wild card berth as well. So I think they will be a playoff team. It's going to be I think we're going to see a very different environment that we've seen at Lucas Oil Stadium the past couple years. It's Carson Wentz's debut. T.Y. Hilton re-signed, and the whole bring T.Y. home movement, that's going to get Colts fans fired up. Like you said, 63,000 fans. It's going to be a packed house after a lot of fans weren't able to go to games because of COVID last year. I think we're going to see Lucas Oil Stadium louder than it's been in recent years, and we're excited just to see what this Colts team is about, and especially what Carson Wentz is going to do for this team. So I think it's going to be, obviously it's going to be a tremendous challenge for the Indianapolis Colts to go up against Seattle and win week one. The Colts haven't won a week one game since 2013 against the Oakland Raiders when Terrell Pryor was still the quarterback. So that's quite that's quite a throwback there. Yeah. So it's gonna be a hard fought game. But I think that it's, like I said, that environment within Lucas Oil Stadium, that's going to be a big plus for this Colts team. And I think the Colts are going to be ready to go. Jim Irsay wants to win that first game. So I think Frank Reich and Carson Wentz are going to want to show the entire world that they're ready to fight for this year. So it's going to be a good one.
I said I didn't want to do predictions, but right now, just off the cuff, I'm not going to hold you to this, come the season, but Colts win or lose that first game?
I think the streak ends. I think the Colts do win week one, and I think it's going to be a close game. It might even come down to Zach's favorite player, Rodrigo Blankenship, Hot Rod, hitting a game-winning field goal. But I think it's going to be a very close game, going to be a hard-fought game, but I do think the Colts will come out on top.
So I want to move on to week two here. Again, at home, Lucas Oil Stadium, 1 o'clock on Fox on September 19th. Another NFC West opponent. Your pick to win the division, Los Angeles Rams. I think they come out of week two with a 1-1 record. I think week two is going to be a really, really tough matchup. Obviously, we know the star power the Rams have, and that's not even including Matthew Stafford now. I really think this is a legit Super Bowl team. I think when it all comes down to it, they're going to be my NFC representative in Super Bowl 56. But this is a great team on paper. The one matchup I cannot wait to watch live and on all 22, though, Aaron Donald against Quinton Nelson. I don't care what else happens at all on the field. I want to watch that matchup, and that's what I'm focusing on. Where are you at with the Rams? Obviously, you picked them to win the NFC West, but are you kind of in the same, area with me that this is just a ridiculously loaded team?
Yeah, I think I am. I think the Rams are going to be one of those top teams in the NFC going up against Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers returns. I think I put them in the same kind of conversation as the Packers. The Rams, I can't wait to see that heavyweight battle either, Aaron Donald versus Quinton Nelson. I kind of hope that they don't move Aaron Donald around and try to match him up with Glowinski. I hope they actually do let him go head-to-head more often than not. And I think for that game, it's going to be exciting to see how Matthew Stafford – really how he changes and what he's able to do. He's out of Detroit now. He's with the best offensive-minded coach that he's ever been with in Sean McVay. He's got plenty of weapons outside with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Deshaun Jackson. So that he's going to let it rip. And I'm excited to see kind of what Matthew Stafford has in that Rams uniform. And the Colts defense is going to have to be ready because they're going to be coming out firing. They're going to want to score a lot of points. And then on the other side of the ball, we still need to kind of make sure that Carson Wentz is protected. We can't, and it's going to be still building up his confidence at that point. So we can't just let Aaron Donald get free rushes or Leonard Floyd, who they re-signed to a massive deal. Jalen Ramsey probably the best cornerback in the league, in my opinion, going out there against probably lining up against T.Y. Hilton. So there's matchups all over this field in this game. I probably would give the Rams an edge in this game as well, especially if the Colts do beat Seattle. There might be just a little bit of a letdown there, but it's going to be a tough matchup for the Colts week 2, and that's just the start of this tough 5-week stretch that they have to start the season.
Yeah, I do think right now though. I am leaning heavily Matthew Stafford MVP season. Just putting him with McVay and those weapons that you mentioned. This will be the best situation he's ever been in. And I've always been a Matthew Stafford defender. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate the Colts have to see him week 2 at this season at all, really. But you did mention a good point, though, about Carson Wentz. We have to remember the Rams lost Brandon Staley, their defensive coordinator in the offseason, now the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. I do wonder how much of an impact that has on the Rams. Staley was a just mastermind at scheming up blitzes and getting pressure on quarterbacks. So I'm glad to see the Rams in that defense week 2 because I don't think that the next DC is going to be able to have those guys completely up to speed to what he wants. So I think that helps Carson Wentz big time. But keep him upright and keep his confidence at a high level. Also, please avoid Jalen Ramsey as much as possible. So last one here, and then we do have a question from YouTube. But week 3, the streak of home games ends, at least for the time being. The Colts are on the road September 26th at the Tennessee Titans. That's at 1 o'clock on CBS. We know the Titans well. And then obviously they added Julio Jones in the offseason via trade to pair with A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, and Ryan Tannehill. But it's important to remember they lost a ton of pieces. They let Jonnu Smith walk in free agency. They cut Malcolm Butler. This defense, obviously they added Bud Dupree. I want to give Bud Dupree credit there. He's a fantastic pass rusher, but he's coming off a torn ACL. Don't know if he'll be completely ready. I truly believe, and I know this is going to sound just absolutely blasphemous to some Colts fans, but I think this is a legitimate Super Bowl team out of the AFC. I know that there's serious depth concerns with this Titans team, but, I mean, you're really only projecting on paper that everyone stays healthy. And I don't know how you match up with this team offensively. Yeah, you're going to have to outscore them, but that's a revamped pass rush that could potentially mask a poor secondary. Where are you at with the Titans at this point? Where do you see them finishing in the division? And how do you feel about the offensive weaponry?
So I'm not as high on the Titans as you are. I don't think that the Julio Jones trade puts them in that Super Bowl conversation yet. I still would put with Kansas City. I'd put Buffalo. I'd put Cleveland at this point up there. And I think the Colts are still the favorites to win the division. I really do. Just because when you look at that defense, I mean, you talked about Bud Dupree, fantastic pass rusher, but coming off an ACL. They did get Danico Autry from the Colts, and I know he's going to be mad and wanting to show off against the Colts, but we've got a stud offensive line that I think can handle him. They also lost Jadeveon Clowney. While Jadeveon Clowney didn't have the number of sacks last year, he still created some decent pressure. And I think that's where the Colts are going to be able to have success against this team, is because we saw what a healthy Colts team was able to do against the Tennessee Titans last year when they went down to Tennessee and beat them 34-17 on Thursday Night Football. So when you're now going over to the offensive side of the ball, I mean, there's no denying Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, even Ryan Tannehill, who's been playing phenomenal the past couple of years. But there's also only one football. And I still think that this offense will go through Derrick Henry. And when we have a DeForest Buckner fully healthy against that, when we have Grover Stewart in there, we have Taekwon Lewis, who's I think is as good of a run defender as Danico Autry. I wouldn't put him as high as a pass rusher as Danico Autry. And then Kwity Paye. I think that defensive line is going to be very good. The Titans' offensive line, I don't hold in very high regard. No. So if you're able to stop Derrick Henry still and put that pressure on Brian Tannehill to perform, I still think that's going to be the Colts' way to victory. And we've kind of – people say like Julio Jones, and I'm not going to discredit Julio Jones at all. Phenomenal wide receiver, one of the top – in my book, top 10 all time. But Julio Jones has never won a Super Bowl. And he was on some good teams with the Falcons. So I don't think that Julio Jones is necessarily a guy that puts them over the top. I still think it will come down to the very, very last week of the season, neck and neck, Colts, Titans for that division. But I don't necessarily think they're unbeatable or in that Super Bowl conversation. And I think just because these teams know each other so well, both of these games are going to be close, and it's going to come down to execution like it always does.
A couple of things to note. Titans obviously lost. Offensive coordinator Arthur Smith is now the head coach in Atlanta. It will take the Titans a few weeks to work out some of these kinks. New offensive coordinator. I don't think they're obviously going to try and reinvent the wheel offensively. But you have a superstar receiver. You're going to want to try and get him touches. You're going to have some kinks to iron out. I do give the Colts that edge in week 3. I am a little disappointed with the schedule makers that the second matchup is in week 8. That is October 31st, so Halloween, and it's at 1 o'clock. I think that the schedule makers really dropped the ball here. Could you imagine Titans Colts Sunday Night Football later in the year? It's flexed because they're competing for the AFC South title. I'm disappointed in the schedule makers, and yes, I'm on my soapbox. But so those are the first 3 weeks. Very tough stretch. The next time we have Andrew on, maybe Thursday, maybe next week, we will do the next 3 games and try and get past that tough 5-game stretch to start the year that could hypothetically and maybe realistically make or break the 2021 season for the Colts. Like I mentioned, we do have one question from a YouTube viewer. This is from Colts Loyalist 5678. What would you set the over-under at for sacks from our defensive ends? Now, that's including everyone in the defensive end room. I think to make this easier for Colts Loyalists, we're going to just do the 4 that we project to make the roster. So, for me, that's obviously – we're assuming Odeyingbo is on PUP, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So, let's say Kwity Paye, Taekwon Lewis, Kamoko Toure. I'll stretch it to 5. Al-Quadin Muhammad and Ben Banogu. Over under on sacks from those 5, unless you have a different set of 5.
I think we could start out with that 5. I think Kwity Paye, like I said, I think you might start out slow, but towards the end of the year, we're going to see him really come on. I'd probably say he's probably about maybe 8 sacks. That'd be a good number.
8.5.
Yeah, so. That'd be a good number. Taekwon Lewis, I think he can get with more opportunities. I think he can probably get around 7, maybe 7.5 sacks. Al-Quadin Muhammad, we'll go to him, and then I'll do the other 2 second-round picks. Muhammad, I think he'll play sparingly, and he's never been a high sack guy. So I'm going to put maybe 2 sacks for Al-Quadin Muhammad. Kamoko Toure, I think he's the biggest wild card in this, because if Toure is healthy, I could see him with a full season getting maybe 6 to 7 sacks, even in just sub-package play. But if he's injured, it's a whole different story. I'm going to say he stays healthy this year. I'm going to go 6 sacks for Kamoko Toure. And then Ben Banogu, I'm going to be optimistic here and give him another 2, just because I'm not sure he makes the roster week 1. But altogether, I'd probably say if you put all 5 of those guys together, maybe looking somewhere between 25 to 28 sacks on the year.
So let's say 26.5.
Yeah, well, I could do that.
Would you take over or under 26.5?
I'd probably take the over, just because I think as an entire group, we're going to see some guys have sacks that we didn't necessarily expect, and even have Dayo Odeyingbo come in there and maybe get a sack or 2 this year. So I'm going to go optimistically. I'll say over 26.5.
I'm with you. I actually think that Paye could hit that double-digit mark right away. And if Kamoko Toure, fully healthy, plays 700 snaps, this could sound crazy. I really think he could hit double-digit sacks as well in the right situations, being on the field in the right pass rush situations. I think 26.5 there, Colts Loyalist, is a perfect over-under out of those 5 we mentioned. Again, that's Kwity Paye, Ben Banogu, Kamoko Toure, Taekwon Lewis, and Al-Quadin Muhammad. I'm not going to include Isaac Rochelle, and we did not include Dayo Odeyingbo because he would be on PUP for at least the first 6 weeks. So 26.5, I don't know what the sports books would have it at. but that's mine and Andrew's over-under. So take it how you will, but certainly appreciate the question, and certainly appreciate you watching live here with us on YouTube. That's going to do it for tonight. Andrew, this was an absolute blast. Hope to do it again with you here soon. Great job tonight. Great job. Just overall, your time with SI so far has been awesome. Certainly looking forward to big things from you this season. And just continue to follow us along here. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Moore SI right there underneath his face. And then I am at by Josh Carney, obviously right underneath my face on Twitter. Please follow the Facebook page, Horseshoe Huddle on Sports Illustrated. We are growing our audience there. It's doing wonders. We are having a blast as we go. You can also find Horseshoe Huddle on Twitter at SI Colts. And then you can follow the show on Twitter. It is at Horseshoe Guys. So there's that. This has been the Monday night edition. Again, just an absolute blast. Please leave your thoughts below in comments. Let us know how we did. I'm excited for the season, Andrew. So any final thoughts from you?
It's going to be a fun season. I can't wait for training camp to get started. There's a lot of storylines heading into camp, and I think this is a team that fans can be really excited about. So it's going to be fun to watch, that's for sure.
Yeah, and a nice shout out here from CJ. Says you're the number one Colts expert. So we are definitely lucky to have you. And then Andrew, any other plugs? You can plug the Educated Fan podcast. You're doing a great job there with your co-host.
Yeah, Brandon Moses and I have a podcast called The Educated Fan where we talk about Colts football every week. In the season, we're going to have 2 episodes a week, just like here at the Horseshoe Guys. So tune into that. Tune into my articles on Sports Illustrated with the previews of the training positions as we go to training camp, as well as check out the Rookie File series. And then once training camp gets started, we're gonna get the ball rolling. It's gonna be a fun time.
Yeah, just real quick, you have defensive tackles next for your position preview, and then Sam Ellinger for Rookie Files. I'm very excited to read that one. Followed Sam a long time in Texas, more than 40 career starts. Obviously, the tragic story about his brother just days after being drafted. But excited to see what you find in your research there. But that's going to do it for tonight. We're going to get out of here. We are over an hour here. But we will be back, at least I will be back on Thursday. I'm not sure who my co-host will be, whether that's Jake Arthur, Zach Hicks, or obviously Andrew Moore. But follow us on YouTube. You can find us. You can find the Horseshoe Guys on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate, review, and just shoot us a message and let us know how you think we're doing. But again, for Andrew, I'm Josh. That's going to do it here tonight. Thanks so much for watching.